Today's the fourth Sunday in Lent, which means that we are just over the hump, just halfway during this Lenten season, and so it's time to check in with you about all your Lenten disciplines. How's it going? Are you doing well? You keeping them? Are you actually using this season to try and kind of nudge yourself toward a little bit of growth? That's the gift of the season of Lent, truly, is that we get a chance to look at ourselves, to reflect, to grow in our self-awareness, to actually say stuff we like, stuff we wish we could do better, and ways to grow. And so I hope that you've been doing that. And if you haven't been, it's not too late. It's never too late. You've got a few more weeks before we get to Holy Week, that wonderful week where we actually look at the entire arc of God's salvation story through Christ. And so I hope that you'll take even just these last few weeks to actually give yourself the opportunity to grow just a bit. Because I think growth, the chance to change, that's really what our gospel lesson is all about today. Now we know this gospel lesson. I think pretty much all of us know at least the basics. There are two brothers. The younger brother wants all of his inheritance, and so the father gives it to him, and he goes out and he squanders it, he wastes it, and he finds himself in a pig trough. And he basically says, anything is better than this. And so he goes and he grovels back to his father, but the groveling isn't even necessary because the father is so excited to see him. We often focus on the forgiveness, the grace in this story of the father to his youngest son. But perhaps even more important about the grace and the forgiveness is the abundance that the father shows this younger son. Not only did the father forgive and welcome the son back in, but the father did all of the abundant, lavish, grace-filled love for his son. He gave him the best of everything. Ring and a robe and a fatted calf and a party. He gave him everything that he could to show just how excited he was for him to be back, just how forgiven and loved he is. And that is typically the focus of the story when it is taught. In fact, the story is called The Prodigal Son. And yet, we are all in church on a pretty day in March, and so we're probably not quite like the younger son. We are probably mostly like the older son. Most of the time doing the right stuff, most of the time doing our best. Nobody's perfect, but we do give it a good shot. And the fact that you're even here this morning shows that you probably do preference doing what is expected, what you hope to do in your life most of the time. And so I like focusing on the second half of this story, the older son. Because the older son is more like us. Doing the right thing. Somebody laughed because that's right. I feel targeted by the older son because the older son, he's done all the stuff he's supposed to do. He has been faithful, he's been present, he has worked hard, he has earned, and he has watched his younger brother not just leave, but leave with half of whatever the family had, waste half of what the family had, embarrass the family, shame the family, and then when he comes back, what does his father do? Lavishly loves and forgives this waste of a person. And then the older brother sins, I think, even more. What are the sins of the older brother? The sins of the older brother: pride, jealousy, anger, self-righteousness. That older brother has had enough of whatever kind of grace and love this father gives. And so he flames all over his father with all of that righteous anger. And the father turns and says, "You've always been with me, and you will always be with me." But what we do here is we welcome in those who have been lost. We love and we forgive those who have hurt. That nothing can separate us from that kind of forgiveness and love, because it's what you and I have always had, and we get to share it. How easy it would be for us who do right most of the time to be very quick to judge. How easy it would be for us who do right most of the time to point out the speck in our neighbor's eye rather than focusing on the plank in our own. How easy it would be for us, who perhaps have never hit rock bottom, who have never really found ourselves that kind of lost and that kind of desperate, to judge those who do. When all the while, our strength, our courage, our confidence, our ability, it all comes from God alone, and it always has. What a gift to be reminded that we are, have been, and always will be loved by God. That we, even those of us who try our very best to do the right thing most of the time, will fall short in some way and need that kind of grace and forgiveness, and we get it from God. And so who are we to get in the way of God's abundant, lavish grace and love poured out on any other person and every other person? We too have that kind of gift. And I think we anchor that kind of gift, that awareness, right here in this church. And so I want to tell you a story. Because about a year ago, I got a note from a new member who, with her permission, has allowed me to tell this story to you, because I think it's important for us to be reminded of this kind of habit that we can get used to and how powerful what we do right here in this church actually is. Last year when the parishioner wrote to me, she wrote following a sermon I'd offered about mental health, and she said that the message really resonated with her because she was struggling and she was hurting. And that about a year earlier, she had walked into St. Michael in a very dark place in her life. That at the time, she had just achieved 2 years of sobriety from alcohol abuse, but she was finding herself being triggered by all of those things that would cause her to relapse, and she was very afraid. She'd been going to a women's recovery meeting somewhere else in Dallas, but she felt like she needed to return to church, and so she just went searching online, and for no reason at all, found St. Michael, and so showed up that next Sunday. And she said, when I arrived, I immediately felt welcome and like I belonged. Even though my life felt like it was such a mess, the church brought me in and has been such a blessing in my life in so many ways that I don't even know the side effects yet. But it has transformed me and my relationships. And for someone who has suffered with mental health issues and addiction for most of my life, I will celebrate 3 years of recovery this summer, and I'm certain that being at St. Michael was one of the reasons I did not relapse. I'm so grateful for the blessing of this church in my life. Simple, easy. Someone who had forgotten that she was loved, someone who had forgotten that she was a beloved child of God, was reminded by coming here. And so what we might take for granted as a regular habit, as just an every week kind of experience, can make a difference in someone's life, literally life and death, to a person who has felt themselves lost. Every day, there are people all around us who need to be shown that kind of grace and love, that kind of welcome, and that kind of powerful forgiveness. We indeed know the gift of this church. We know the gift of God's love for us. And although we may need to be reminded, it's probably hard for us to forget. And so today, remember just how important the gift we have received can be to those around us who themselves are lost. I thank God that we have this kind of reminder, that we have this kind of anchor to help buoy us when life gets hard, but even more so to help us to extend and remind those that they too are loved. By becoming people who know we are loved and forgiven by God, we become people who can love and forgive others too. Amen.